Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jayant on Cloud. My name is Jayant. I work as a senior principal engineering technologist at Dell Technologies, and I'm also a Microsoft MVP. So today, in my podcast, I have a special guest, Andri Ahmad, who is joining me all the way from Indonesia. Hello, Andri. Welcome.
Hello, Jayan. Thank you for having me. It is
So
my pleasure to join your podcast. Hope we will
it's
have a very interesting and useful content for the audience.
I am lucky to have you as my guest speaker today in my YouTube channel. So thank you for taking time out, Andrew. Appreciate that. So Andrew and I am here to talk about some of the best practices of Azure Stack HCI sizing. Okay, so that's probably one of the most discussed questions, at least in the community that I live in, which is the Microsoft hybrid cloud, as to what are some of the best practices when you size Azure Stack HCI in general. So, we can't have a better person than Andrew because I've worked very closely with Andrew in the APJ region. I've found him to be the expert when it comes to sizing Azure Stack HCI. Andrew, before we go ahead and start talking about the sizing, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure, Jayan. Hello again, everyone. My name is Andri Ahmad. I'm a pre-sales specialist for converged and hyperconverged technologies at Dell. I'm based in Jakarta, Indonesia. My role is subject matter expert on Dell CI and SCI products such as VxRail, PowerFlex, and of course, our highlight of today, Azure Stack HCI. I cover mostly APJ regions such as Southeast Asia, India, ANZ, and rest of Asia emerging markets.
That is awesome. So, I think we can get started. So, are you all set, Andrew?
Sure.
All right. So, Andrew, so a couple of things, right? So, before we get started, what are some of the tools that are available today to start Azure Stack HCI sizing? And if I may ask, would you be comfortable doing a quick demo of how to actually size with these tools? That would be really appreciated.
Yeah, sure. So for sizing and Azure Stack HCI, actually Microsoft has their tools for everyone to sizing based on the workload. And of course, usually each of a hardware vendor, especially like Dell, we have also uh, a Sizer, which is customized to our product or offering, right? So probably today I will demo those two tools to give you understanding on the best practice on sizing. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's get cracking. Feel free to share your screen.
All right. Yeah.
All right. So
Let
while
me.
Andrew is trying to share his screen, just a quick update to our listeners. Feel free to skip ahead if you want to, if you need to the further sections of this video. There's going to be different chapters. Feel free to skip ahead if you need to, because if this is going to be a long session. Considering that Andrew is going to walk us through the length and breadth of Azure Stack HCI sizing. Thank you.
All right. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay. Wait a second.
Do you want to just maximize, maybe just zoom in a little bit? Yeah.
All right. I think. How about now?
Yeah, that's better. Yeah.
Okay. So we have
Even this screen, I
Microsoft.
guess. Yeah.
Yep. This one is too small, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, that's better. Yeah. There you go.
So first of all, before you start start sizing, it is very crucial for you to have your workload information, right? So a data-driven sizing is always best, right, to get the right sizing. So it will not be undersizing or oversizing, but because we want to have very cost-effective TCO, right? So we have also Dell also provide some tools to gather some information, especially if you want to migrate some of your existing workload into the Azure Stack HCI platform. So if you see now, we have LiveOptics. So LiveOptics is one of the tool that is freely that you can use to get all this information from your compute, CPU, memory, and storage, right? Your capacity, performance, IOPS, throughput, and everything. It can be run for several days or 1 week, 5 days, for example, and then you can see the data, which is really show that the actual data, especially if you run it on a peak on a busy on a busy day, for example. So you can have a real real time information, right? So that's one of
Andri,
the
is this tool that is this something that customers need to license this tool, or it's a free tool that's available, or how does one use this tool?
So basically, the tool is very free, and you can ask your Dell account team to do it for you, or you can just register on this website, right? Probably later you can put it on the description, right? And then you can just start running the assessment tool, right?
Okay.
So basically the tool, you need to have access to your infrastructure, right? So there's some collector running, and it's very secure as well. So it can mask all the information such as the server name, IP addresses, right? And even the result, you can only you can see it. If you want us to help you analyze, you can send it to us in a very secure manner. So
Awesome. So is
yeah.
there any ports that customers need to open through the firewall, or any particular URL that needs to be allowed through the firewall?
So basically, it's depending on your environment. If you have a VMware environment, for example, you can probably you need to have user access, admin access to the vCenter, so the collector can get all the information from the vCenter. Or if this is standalone server, for example, right? It can collect from the if it is Windows, for example, it will use the Windows Management Instrument (WMI) and some of the SSH to the. So it has a different methodology for each type of server. Yeah.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Okay, then if you have all the sizing, all the data for your workload data, and then I mean, if this is a green field, for example, you can work with your application consultant and then determine the requirement for your workloads, right? And then you're ready for sizing. So we have first Microsoft Sizer, right? As you can see here, you can go to this website and then click the Sizer and then create new project. Here I already have created a project, and first in the project you can specify your preference. So preference here, you wanted the result to be filtered into a certain criteria, right? For example, the system type, whether you want to have an integrated system or a validated node, right? So obviously, the integrated system has much more benefit and value. It is a recommended solution from Microsoft, and most of the hardware vendor also provide integrated system like Dell. We are one of the pioneer on the integrated system. We have many joint engineering and joint support, which make your deployment is very seamless as possible, right?
So just a quick note to our listeners here. Andrew is making a very, very valid point here, right? As to why we recommend, and Dell's approach is completely towards integrated systems, right? And it's also something that's recommended, as you can see, from Microsoft as well, because it brings that value proposition for customers. Now, if you do really want to understand the difference between a validated node versus an integrated node, so I've done a lengthy video on comparing these two different platforms, which are available today in the market. I would strongly encourage you to go through that video in my YouTube channel. That's Jayant on Cloud. Feel free to take a look at that video. So there's a detailed analysis and comparisons between integrated systems versus validated. All right, go ahead, Andri. Thank you.
Yep. The next criteria is your preferred CPU family, right? I know some of customer they have a lot of core requirements and they prefer AMD, but mostly some of them are using Intel, right? And then another criteria is obviously your hardware vendor, right? So here we click Dell. So hey, there's also another criteria which is specific for edge use cases, right? If you want to have a two-node solution, you can click two-node solution, and then it always give you the two-node solution, which is useful for edge use cases, right? So for now, I just untick the two-node solution.
Okay.
And then another criteria is the resiliency requirements, right? So there's two aspects. First, from the compute perspective, right? Do you want to have N+1 high availability for your compute, right? So this is recommended. So it means that if you have one node failures, your VM can migrate to another remaining nodes, right? And those nodes have sufficient capacity to hold those VMs, right? And from the storage perspective, because storage usually is much more critical than the compute, right? Because if you lose all your data, right, you cannot do anything.
Yeah.
So that's why we always recommend that it is N+2. So N+2 means that even if you lose two nodes, right, you can still have your data, even if it's still online. Your data still can be accessible. So usually, when we enable the failure to tolerate up to two nodes, we use what we call mirroring. So we have a three-way mirroring for starting from 3 node, and then two-way mirroring for 2 node, right? And there's many other aspects of resiliency in Azure Stack HCI, such as mirror accelerated parity and also dual parity, but it will be case per case. So at this Microsoft Sizer, it's basically two, or three-way mirroring, or two-way mirroring is the one that is recommended. But later, if you want to have a more granular design, you can always have contact us, the expert, to size it for you. Right?
Yeah, I think it's good to see the Microsoft Sizer actually gives you options in terms of high availability, resiliency kind of requirement, both from a compute node perspective and also from a storage perspective, right? So that way, customers or whoever is sizing the solutions, like for example pre-sales, can actually understand what is the appetite for customers failure in terms of high availability and all of that from a both compute perspective as well as storage. That's great, really.
Exactly. And then the next criteria is the storage type, right? So this is also you need to consider your workload, right? Whether it is write or read a heavy workload, or storage intensive workload, or it is just compute intensive workload, right? Or you may want it to be to have more capacity rather than performance, right? But as you want to modernize your data center, I usually recommend you start with all-flash storage type, because it has more sustainability factor, right? It's smaller from the dimension, from the U size, rack unit size. You can consolidate more workload on the smaller dimension, and it's also power savings, right? It can reduce your power requirement. So it's one of the characteristic of how you modernize your data center. And more beyond that is that from the performance perspective, if you look at the architecture, it is a single tier architecture. So it means that you don't have any cache between your workload to the capacity. All the read and write I/O is directly goes to the disk, and it's distributed very well. So there's no tax on the memory capacity, because you don't need cache. Cache has a little bit of overhead in the memory.
Yeah.
So that is basically that I recommend for you to
I
start.
think performance, the key metrics are performance, and I think the SSDs or NVMEs, the rate of failure of these drives are significantly lesser compared to spinning disks.
Exactly.
So one of the compelling reasons for you to use either SSD or NVMe.
Exactly. Right. And then the next one is the growth, right? So you don't want to end up buying an infrastructure, and at the first month everything is already fully populated, right? So sometimes you want to have growth. You can define growth 10%, 25%, depending on your business requirement. And then because the infrastructure is hyper-converged, it is very easy to scale, right? To expand. You can scale up or scale out, right? And in a very granular way. Compare if you are using a legacy three-tier infrastructure, for example, you have many components like storage, right? It has some limitation on number of controller and enclosure, for example. If you want to expand, you need to expand a new system, right? And then you need to migrate your data into it. So it's very a complex way, but in hyperconverged, it's very easy. You just add nodes, and then everything will be, the capacity will be automatically increased in your cluster, right? And then we have SDN. So this is if you want to deploy SDN, software-defined networking. The Sizer also calculates the requirement on infrastructure VM for SDN, such as network controller, software load balancer, right? Distributed gateway and firewall. So depending on your requirement, you can click if you want to use SDN, and then the Sizer will calculate the overhead for you. Right, so that's the first one, the preferences, right? And then the second one is your workload. So this is quite important, right? You need to size how many workload that you want to deploy on your cluster, right? Here I just have one type of workload, right? You may have a different T-shirt sizer for your workload, like small VM, medium VM, or large VM, right? But this, I just make a very simple example here. So you can also choose a different type of workload, which is available on from the Sizer, which then will automatically change the VM details for you, right? So I just stick to the general first, right? And then how many VM I want to have in my infrastructure, and then the vCPU per VM, how many vCPU per VM, and then virtual to physical ratio, right? So how many virtual CPU is the ratio from your physical core. So basically, we use as a rule of thumb, you can start with 1 to 4, for example. But if you have much more details on your workload, like when you're running a LiveOptics, you can see the overall physical to virtual ratio of your CPU. So we can use that. Usually I use just 4, and then memory per VM, how many memory per VM, and how many storage per VM. That is straightforward, right? So here I have a 4 vCPU, 1 to 4, 17 gigabyte RAM, and 200 gigabyte storage, right? So I can just click next to see the result, right?
It reduces so much of overhead in terms of calculation, especially I like the physical to virtual ratio. It automatically calculates all of that for you. So without you having to run through the mathematics. That's awesome.
Right. So it basically calculate all the requirement and also the overhead for you. So you don't have to worry about calculating the overhead by yourself, right? So here we see that the result will be 3AX650. So AX650 is our Dell Azure Stack HCI appliance. So 650 is based on PowerEdge 650, which is a 1U PowerEdge server, right? So here we have 2 sockets using 32 core, and then 1 terabyte of RAM, and 31 terabyte capacity. So this is using a single tier all flash, right? So you have 4 8 terabyte SSD per node, right? So with 3 nodes, you can see here that, okay, first let's talk about the compute capacity, right? So total, if you have 3 nodes, per node is 64 core, total you will have around 192 cores, right? But remember, it is n plus 1. So n plus 1, it means that you spare 1 node as a spare, although it's not literally means that you have a standby 1 node. But in terms of overall capacity, you spare the capacity of 1 node. So it means that you spare about 64 core. So you only can use only one third, sorry, 2/3 of the capacity, right? 128 cores.
So
Right?
that's the option that we chose in the first screen when it asked for
Correct.
high availability, saying compute is
Correct.
n+1. Okay.
Correct. And then the blue bar here, it is from your workload requirement. Remember that you already input the number of VMs, vCPU, and also the vCPU, physical to virtual ratio. So it calculates for you the actual physical core capacity requirement. So it's your workload will use around 100 cores, and then you also have 10% of growth, right? So 10% from 100 is around 11 cores. So it has some rounding up in the background, right? So here the the bar here is showing you the growth, right? So you have 111 cores for your current workload and then for your growth. And it means that out of 128, you still have around 17 core left. So actually, you still have some spare for more than 10%. So it is very good. So the solution already give you quite optimized sizing on the term of compute in term of CPU. Yeah.
Okay.
And next, from the memory perspective, right? It also apply here n+1, right? So total memory per node is 1 terabyte. So you have 3 nodes around 3 terabyte, right?
Yes.
And then one terabyte is kept for spare. So you only can use 2 terabyte. And then here we have a blue bar from your workloads around 2 terabytes, and then future growth, right, 10%, around 170 gigabytes. And then it also calculates overhead. So overhead here is from your cluster shared volume cache, and also from your storage bus layer. But in terms of single tier, the storage bus layer should be very low, yeah.
Right.
Compare with if you are using a two-tier cache and capacity. So it shows you that it's very low here. It's only like 3 terabytes, 3 gigabytes, right?
Gigabytes,
So
yeah.
overall, you still have 52 gigabyte, right? Small leftover, but it's enough for your requirement, right? Because you already calculated your growth requirement.
Yeah, but it's
So
very important to understand the overheads also that are getting involved here, right?
Yeah.
It just doesn't mean that just because it's n+1, that means I can just load everything for the remaining 2 nodes, right? It may not have enough memory resources to accommodate in case of a node failure. So it's very important to understand some of the overheads that are available in terms of CSV, Hyper-V, host memory, and then future growth and all of that. So yeah, it's a very important metric here. We strongly suggest you to look at this chart before taking that decision.
Right. So if you want, you can also see how it is calculated. There is a exclamation mark here. You can hover down, and then you can see that the memory overhead is calculated based on CSV in memory cache, which is around 1 gigabyte.
Do you want to just zoom in,
Mm-hmm.
Andri? I think it's very small.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's better. Yep.
Yeah. So you can see. So in memory cache, by best practice is usually 1 gigabyte per node, and probably we won't change that unless you have a very read intensive workload, for example, a VDI or something like OLAP databases, for example.
Yes.
So 1 gigabyte is usually enough for most of the cases, right? So it means that you have 1 gigabyte times 3 gigabyte. And what about the SBL? So SBL in case of single tier will be 0, because if this is cache and capacity, so you will require about 4 gigabyte per terabyte of cache. So if you have 2 terabyte cache, you will need 8 gigabyte of memory overhead. In this case, it's 0, right? You also have a Hyper-V memory. It's about 4% system overhead for your Hyper-V host, right? Right. So next, we'll take a look into the storage, right? So our requirement.
So Andri, just a quick question on SPL. So let's say, for example, if it's a hybrid tier, for example, it's multi-tier kind of an architecture where you have spinning disks and also cache. So I read in the Microsoft article somewhere that you can go up to about 10% for your cache?
Yep. So there
Okay.
is correct. Correct. Yes. So there is a ratio in terms of cache capacity. How big is it your cache should be? So the best practice should be around more than 10% between your cache size and your capacity size. So it's calculated per node. So for example, you have say 10 terabyte of raw capacity in your one node, right? It means that 10% around 1 terabyte, you need to have around 1 terabyte cache per node. More than that is good, right? Depending on your workload space, yeah. So it usually, if you look into detail from the LiveOptics information, for example, you can see your write throughput and then your read throughput, and then how much is the workspace, yeah, that your workload is using. So sometimes that also useful in sizing your case, but as general rule of thumb, basically more than 10% of cache is good enough. Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
And then storage, right? So this is your capacity, storage capacity. Remember, if you are talking about cache and capacity, cache will not participate into your storage capacity. It's just how it to increase your performance, right? So here, your workload is in the dark blue bar here. It's required about 20 terabytes. And then we are using two N+2, right? N+2 means that we are using three-way mirroring. So three-way mirroring means that you have 3 copies of your data, right? So you use 20 terabytes. So you have 3 copies of your data. So total, you will require about 60 terabyte. So 20 terabyte you are using for your workload, and then another 40 terabyte is for the resiliency, right? So what this resiliency is used for? So say, for example, one node's down, right? So one node's down means that your data, you have 3 copy. You still have your primary data and then your second copy, right? So you still safe. What about if you lose 2 nodes? So if you lose 2 nodes, then your data still online. You still use your primary copies, but you lose your secondary and tertiary data. But it's all by design, because it is your second copy and tertiary copy is used for resiliency, right?
Got it.
So that's why from 92 terabyte total. So 92 terabyte is coming from total of your disk capacity. So you have 31 terabyte per node. You have 3 nodes. So total you have around 92 terabytes. And then there is also a reserve capacity. So reserve capacity means that you need some spare capacity for rebuilding purposes, right? So if some disk fail or one node fail that I mentioned before, you need to have some copy of the data from that failure disk or failure node. So this spare capacity is useful to store those temporary building the data, right?
Got it.
So your data can move around. So it usually takes one disk from one node up to 4 nodes, right? So in this case, we have 3 nodes. We just take one disk. So here, one disk is about 8 terabyte.
Yep.
So you have 3 nodes, means that you have 3 times 8. So you have around 23 or 24 terabytes, right? With the rounded value here.
It rounds off the total. Yeah, right.
Yeah, so you have this reserve capacity that you cannot use. This is very critical for your system to perform rebuilding, right, rebalancing, and so on, right? So it means that you have use capacity and resiliency, and also a future growth, right? So you still have leftover 2 terabytes, right? Remember, leftover 2 terabytes, you cannot use all 2 terabytes. You have to divide by 3. So you have like 0.6 terabyte, around 600 gigabyte usable, because you need another 600 and another 600 for resiliency, right?
Resiliency.
Yeah.
That's a great point.
So yeah. So this is all aspects, compute and storage capacity from the hardware, which is recommended by Microsoft Sizer, right?
Okay.
The IOPS, I don't think it will be around for some time from Microsoft, because usually the hardware vendor has the capability to test the IOPS per configuration. So probably you can ask to us if you want to have a specific requirement on how many IOPS that you want. We have some benchmark that we can use as a reference, right?
Yeah. So I know for most of our pre-sales who are watching this podcast, right, may kind of have this thing that, the IOPS information is not readily available in our Sizer, which Andri is going to walk us through the Dell Sizer. But that's something, stay tuned. It's going to come in our next generation of next generation of Azure Stack HCI platforms. But for now, we don't have that today. But so like Andri was saying, feel free to reach out to one of the specialist teams like Andri or someone in the respective regions. So they should be able to give you some kind of a benchmark on what is going to be the IOPS for the configuration that you're going to be picking.
Right. So then, if you already have this recommendation, you can just talk to us, and then we have our own Sizer, right?
Okay.
So
So quick question, Andri. So now that we got the workload information from LiveOptics, so we are feeding that information into the Microsoft Sizer, and from here, where do we go?
Yeah. So from here, after we get the recommendation, we need to validate from hardware vendor like Dell.
Okay.
To validate their offering. Sometimes there's a little bit gap from what the Microsoft website and then the one that in hardware vendor Sizer like Dell, right? We have all the real offering that we know from our product, right? So it's important that you check to us. So here, usually what we do, we can validate this information, right? So you have 3AX650 all flash, right? I can just here I have Azure Stack HCI operating system experience. Remember, there's a difference between building hyperconverged using Azure Stack HCI OS and Windows Server OS. So basically, we recommend that always try the Azure Stack HCI OS because it has some benefits. So Microsoft even invested more features on Azure Stack HCI OS as the best virtualization platform, right? Like stretch clustering is only available on Windows operating system, and extended security updates, benefits, and many other benefits that you can have with Azure Stack HCI OS.
Just a quick note to our listeners. There's also a video on my YouTube channel where I'm comparing Windows Server versus Azure Stack HCI. So feel free to go and check that video out. Thanks, Andrew.
Right. Then you need to decide whether you want to build an active data center or active passive data center using stretch clustering feature, right? So we have that capability in Azure Stack HCI OS. So now for now, let's keep it
Yeah,
simple
so
first.
probably the stretch cluster sizing is for another day. So we are going to, I'm going to sit with Andri. He's got some cool calculator, up and running. So for stretch cluster, so it's going to be a discussion for another podcast. So for this one, we will stick to without any stretch cluster.
Yeah. So this is a standard cluster, right? And then you need to determine whether this is a scalable solution or a switchless solution. So scalable means that you use top of rack switches. And then switchless means that usually for edge, where you don't have any fancy network equipment, right? So you can have your storage traffic connected back to back, right? So you will have your RDMA storage traffic enabled without have to use a very sophisticated network equipment. But in terms of core data center, we recommend that you are choosing a scalable solution with top of rack switch because you can scale very easy and you can guarantee the performance of the RDMA traffic also a very high performance solutions.
Well, Andrew is trying to bring that up, right? So it's
Oops.
just a quick summary of what we discussed so far, right?
Mhm.
It's very, very important to get these things right and probably the best in order. The reason being, if you really have to size a solution, you need to understand what's currently running in customer's environment. So you can use tools like LiveOptics, which Andri, demoed, which collects all of that information from a customer's environment and use some of those metrics and then feed that into the Microsoft Sizer. So Microsoft Sizer would output what should be your right hardware, including the hardware specification, like for example, Dell Technologies AX650 and so on that you saw, when during the demo. So all of that information, including all the overheads that we talked about, for example, if you chose compute n+1, storage n+2, all of those requirements, including the overhead calculation, is already calculated by the Microsoft Sizer. Take that and then come into the Dell Azure Stack HCI Sizer to feed all of that into those into our Dell Sizer.
Okay, the next one is whether you want to build the solution based on scalable or switchless, right? So scalable means that you are using top of rack switches. So it's very easy then to scale. So then you can have your storage traffic and network traffic and your host and management, right? And then you can scale up to 16. The other option is whether you want to have switchless, right? So dual link mesh switchless or single link mesh switchless. This is usually a use case for edge, right? Where usually you don't have any sophisticated network equipment. So your storage traffic still can use the RDMA by using directly connected or back-to-back cables, right? So for now, I just choose scalable, and then I will align with the one that recommended from the Microsoft, right? So three nodes AX650.
Okay.
Right, and then I will adjust also the CPU and the memory.
Okay.
So the CPU will be 32 core, right? So we have this type of CPU with 32 cores, and also we have 1 TB of RAM, right? Just to give a note on this, right? So in Dell AX node or in our integrated system approach, we already tested and validated the type of CPU which is used for many certified use case by Microsoft, right? Like for VDI, for database, high performance database, for Kubernetes, and so on and so forth, right? And we also make sure that the the supply chains for the platform is guaranteed along with your support, right? So that's why we have selected a few CPU, which is what we call a GSP processor, which is a globally worldwide available processor. The other option is a non-GSP, usually where sometimes there's a risk, right, throughout the life cycle that the CPU won't be available. So
Yeah.
that's why we always recommend the GSP processor here.
Got it. Cool.
Right. And then next one is the memory, right? So
1 TB?
usually, yeah, 1 TB, and usually as a best practice, it always follow the memory, the balance memory population, right? So in case of this third generation Intel CPU, we have 16 channel, and then each channels have 2 DIMM slot. So usually we populated all the DIMM slot or half of them. So those are categorized as a balanced configuration, and your memory bandwidth will be around 90 to 100%. If you don't follow that, usually it will reduce the memory performance or bandwidth to 60% or even worse to 30%. So that's why we always validated the memory population into the balanced memory population. Right?
I think this is a very, very important point, Andre, especially to
Mhm.
some of our listeners who are listening to this conversation, and also to some of our pre-sales, who are watching this as well. Just a quick note on this particular one. I know our competitors may come back and say, we can provide you 1.5 TB or 2.5 terabyte or whatever it is, which is generally an unbalanced configuration. So it's very, very important from a technical perspective to educate them. It's not going to be a high performance system if it's not a balanced memory configuration. So it's very, very important to address this, and also share this information with your customers as well, that Dell's approach is to make sure that we give you a system which is really high performant and what is recommended by Microsoft. That's a great point, Andri.
Absolutely, yes. Next, we go into the storage spaces. So storage spaces is our S2D configuration. So we have a single tier all flash configuration, right? So we align to that. So we choose all flash here, right? And then how many drives we have? Let's check
I think it's
it out. So
4.
we have 4 drives, right? And then we have around 8 terabytes. So we can use basically 7.68. So it's rounded to 8. Yeah.
So,
So this
just
one,
a quick one, Andre. So I know when we are picking the drives, it says RI and MU. So what does it mean?
So then we coming back again to your workload requirement, right? Whether your workload is read intensive, write intensive, right? Or have some a balance to that, right? So read intensive means that basically correlate to the endurance of the flash media, right?
Mm-hmm.
So read intensive has one disk write per day endurance. The other one is a mixed use. If you see the MU here is a mixed use, so it's basically around 3 disk write per day, right? And then the highest endurance will be write intensive. So write intensive will be around 10 disk write per day, right? So and obviously the higher endurance, the higher cost. So you may need to if you want to have a right sizing, you can see whether your workload is very write intensive. You can see the percentage of your read IO or write IO, whether the percentage of write is much more than read, for example. In cases such as databases, for example, highly OLTP type of applications. So you may want to have write intensive disk. But I see in field mostly our customers will fall into 80%, even up to 90%. Using just read intensive is a most cost optimized way because it's already all flash, and with our hyperconverged storage space direct, how it works is basically balancing all the I/O, right? The capacity and I/O into a very granular chunk, or in Microsoft terminology called slabs. So it's your data will be divided into 256 megabyte slabs, and it's balanced across all the nodes and all the disks. So you won't have any hotspots. So your disk will not be just particular disk will be quite intensive in terms of read on write. So it's not going to be like that. So all your disks will be balance in terms of read or write intensive. So this will also optimize the media. So you don't really need a write intensive. Just read intensive for most cases in field is enough.
Okay, so just one more note. You may be seeing SAS and vSAS. So that's basically virtual SAS, it's called. But just keep that in mind that SAS is obviously a full duplex version of SAS topology, which uses, for example, dual bandwidth. It could be, let's say, for example, 24 Gbps. That's a throughput that you're going to get. If it's virtual SAS, it's going to be half duplex. So in this case, it can come down to 12 Gbps. So that's something to keep in mind. The Gbps depends on the version of the SAS that you're picking. The latest generations will support 24 Gbps as a full duplex.
Right. Yeah. So you will see the requirement not just by IOPS and write percentage, but also the bandwidth, like Jayan mentioned, right? So whether your workload is throughput or bandwidth intensive. So in cases like analytics or OLAP, so that's usually where you have a very throughput intensive. So you need to see in the architecture end to end what will be the throughput the system is giving, right? So from the network and also from the media, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I mean, now probably we can just choose the SAS 8 terabytes. So now you see on the solution level info, you will have your raw capacity here in terms of CPU. So we don't usually calculate workload in terms of compute here. So it's already taken care of from the Microsoft Sizer. But we can see from the storage, it is aligned to what Microsoft give, right? So usable around 21 terabytes. So it's more or less the same, right? You can also see the pie chart here. So your usable capacity is 21.1 terabyte, and your resiliency is because we have mirroring 100%. So it means that it's a three-way mirror. So you have a mirror efficiency or 1/3 of capacity, right? So your usable is 1/3. 2/3 is your resiliency, and reserve capacity. Remember, reserve capacity is based on one disk per node up to 4 nodes. In case of we have 3 nodes, so we have 3 disks is reserved for spare capacity, right? So here we have another option in our Sizer, which is not taken care by the Microsoft Sizer, but it's very crucial as well, right? So from the from the network part, right, you have to size your network based on, for example, like we talk about the throughput, how many throughput that you want to have, right? In terms of your storage or in terms of your overall VM requirement, right? So we have an option whether you want to have a fully converged or non-converged network. So this is for scalable. So fully converged means if you click fully converged and then you see the architecture diagram. So from the same link, from the same physical port, you will have your virtual network for your host and VM traffic, and also for your storage traffic. So all those traffic logically will be running on this same physical link or port, right?
So in other words, it's a single pipe that carries both management traffic as well as storage traffic, correct?
Correct. The other option is if you want to have a very isolated and guaranteed performance for your storage and for your host and VM traffic, you might want to separate the physical link and port and adapter, right? So here you have a different physical link for your storage, your RDMA network, and then another link is for your management and VM network. So you have an isolated physical link for those two type of traffics.
So Andri, just a quick question.
Mhm.
How does one pick between a converged network topology versus non-converged? What are some of the use cases that we need to be aware of? And where does these two different types of network topologies fit in?
Right. So basically, fully converged has a very cost efficient. So if your workload, so coming back again to your workload sizing, right? If your workload is not that throughput intensive, right? And then you can share the uh, uh, maximum bandwidth from the same physical link. Then you can choose a fully converged. So fully converged is very cost efficient because you just require probably just one network card with dual ports, and then you use both ports for the same teaming. And then on top of those teaming, you can carve multiple logical network, like for your storage, your VM, and your host management. But if you have you require a very isolated performance for your storage traffic, in case of you are building your cluster for high performance SQL databases, for example, I will recommend that you will have a different physical link for your storage traffic. So in this way, it won't be it will be isolated from the other traffic. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So let's probably choose fully converged just for exercising, and then there's the option whether you want to have your customer switches for out-of-band management. So out-of-band management is important in terms of manageability, right? So you still have visibility regardless of your production traffic, right? So basically, we connected all the out-of-band port, which in Dell we call it the ID rack, into the same management switch, and then you can access from a different network to access the out-of-the-band management. We also have this integration later in the open managed integration to use this network as well to access the out-of-band, right?
One important information here is the RDMA, selection of RDMA switches, right? So there is a certified list of RDMA switches that's available in the Microsoft website, which I'll be sharing. That link I'm going to be sharing in this video under the comment section.
Yeah.
So feel free to take a look at that. Not all switches are certified, so it's very important for us to educate our customers and also for our customers to know that there are a certified list of switches that are supported. Okay.
So the Azure Stack HCI is a very performance hyper-converged, right? So we have many benchmark with just few nodes. It achieved multiple millions of IOPS. That is the secret sauce is obviously is the RDMA enabled. So RDMA implementation in Azure Stack HCI is based on SMB Direct and SMB multi-channel. So it can have a multiple parallel link and then distributed load balance the traffic, and it uses the RDMA. So RDMA implementation here can be in form of IWARP or Rocky. So basically the difference between two is that with IWARP, you don't have any complex configuration on your switches. But with Rocky, you need to have DCB and some QoS, PFC, ETS, and other standards configured on your switches. So basically, most modern data center switches support Rocky. So it's just a matter on different configuration between the vendor. But basically, if you're talking about the age, usually broadband switches doesn't have these capabilities. And also, right, Giants mentioned about then you need to see the network card, right? So in Dell, we have validated two type of network card, which is the Mellanox and then the Intel E810. So E810, the latest one is capable of deployed in on different protocol for RDMA, whether it is IWARP or Rocky. But basically, for most performance reason, we just use Rocky as a standard. But if you have a different standard in your data center, we can just provide you which one is your preferable protocol. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, very important to check with your customers, right? Or if you're a customer listening to this conversation as well, it's very important to have that conversation with your networking team to understand what are the standards in your organization, whether you're using DCB exchange protocol to implement Rocky or IWARP, right? So it's an important decision to be made when sizing the Azure Stack HCI cluster.
Right. And you also have options for the other network adapter, which is not for RDMA enabled, like a Broadcom here. It is not validated for RDMA, but it is usually used for your host and VM because your host and VM doesn't really require RDMA. So you have this option, or if you want also to have a very cost efficient, you can have just a single NIC, for example, and then all the traffics will be coming from this NIC. Or you want to have a NIC redundancy, you can just add more network card, and then we can have NIC redundancy as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And then GPU. So today in Azure Stack HCI OS, since 21H2 and then now 22H2, we support GPU. So GPU partition also supported for VDI use cases, for example. Right, if you want to enable the solution and then you want us to give the GPU cards, we can also give you the GPU cards. Right, so this is available if you have this one is 1U Power Edge. So the only option is for 1U is now is NVIDIA Ampere A2. If you want the higher CUDA core GPU type, for example A40, right? You can use the 2-node AX750, for example.
Yeah. Or for instance, even the AX7525.
Yes, correct. And then comes to the licensing part. So Azure Stack HCI OS is a subscription-based license. It's $10 per core per month, right? But now the question is, how would you license your guest VM, right? So we have an option. If you want, we can provide you with our OEM license. So if you want to have unlimited Windows VM, you can use our Windows 2022 data center licenses, and the solution will calculate based on the number of physical CPU core, how many license that you will need, right? Obviously, you can also leverage your enterprise agreement, right? Volume licensing, and then specifically leverage the Azure hybrid benefit using the software assurance, right? Probably, Jens, you have
Yeah, yeah. So
topics on
thanks
that.
for
Yeah.
thanks for pointing that out, Andri. So if you really want to learn more about Azure Stack HCI licensing, so myself and Kirti Nimalapudi from Microsoft sat together to actually discuss length and breadth of Azure Stack HCI sizing. It's again one of those podcasts that is in my YouTube channel. So please go and check that out as well. Go ahead, Andri.
Right. And then there's an option also if you want to transact your subscription from Dell also. So we have an option to have CSV from Dell, but it's only available on some country in APJ. I think it's now available in Singapore, Malaysia, and Australia. So other country probably you need to contact your Microsoft directly or your Microsoft reseller or your local cloud service provider. Yeah.
Okay.
Right. And then the services, this is, you can discuss with us the most appropriate services, right? We recommend Pro Deploy and Pro Support we have our award-winning services to make your implementation day zero, day one operation also as seamless as possible, right?
Yeah.
We can also
Just a
option.
quick
Yeah.
note, right? So services are part of our solution, right? That's why it's called an integrated system, right? So we just don't say integrated system just by selling the hardware. We ensure that the customers throughout the customer's journey, we cover the end-to-end journey of customers, right? From sizing the solution, identifying what's the right product for them, all the way to the implementation, and then even for the migration services using consulting services as well. So Dell is the only hardware OEM out there who can take care of customers' end-to-end journey. Something to keep in mind.
Absolutely, right. Hybrid cloud operating model is not just give you the infrastructure, the technology, but it's a people and process aspect that some customer may forgot about that, right?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, and then optionally we can also give you the rack and also the PDU if you want. So then we can save this and then export to the PDF, and then we can build the quotes for you, and you can see based on your budget whether it meets your budget or you need to tune on optimize a few aspects. So then we give you the complete proposal.
Okay.
Right? So you can check on the PDF here, all the capacity and the SKUs also available.
And this
for
is
your,
something that we
yeah.
can share with our customers as well, right?
Yes, correct. And you have a very nice diagram here for you to have.
Do you want to just quickly
visualization. Yep.
zoom in, Andri?
Yep. Let me.
I think you can just click on the plus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
this
better.
is, yeah.
Okay. So just a quick tip to most of our pre-sales part of our audience, right, who's watching this podcast. A quick tip is I strongly recommend you to sit with your customers, your end customers, to walk through this end-to-end sizing activity. One, it gives them a lot of confidence that Dell is being very upfront and being very transparent in actually sizing this entire solution with the customer. And secondly, there are situations where customers will give you a lot of insights when actually they're trying to pick and choose each of these components. For example, we talked about the decision to go with fully converged or non-converged. If you go with fully converged, should you go with IWAR or Rocky? So these are some of the critical decisions that need to be made. So I strongly suggest you to sit with the customers throughout the end-to-end sizing activity.
Yeah, Jan. I mean, there's many aspects that we may need to adjust with the customer environment, right? Like something that is not showing here is like how you design your Active Directory, for example, right? How your management residing. So that's something that we need to decide with the customer and what is the best in their environment.
Absolutely. All right. I think now we have the sizing output, and I think we're pretty good. So I think, is that it, Andri, or do you have anything else to show us?
Yeah, I think we cover mostly all the sizing processes, and yeah, quote is our final result, so we can give end-to-end proposal to the customer. Now everything is complete. We have the workload requirements and also the decision on each criteria, and then the end result. So customer may need to there can be an iterative process depending on customer budget, customer environment.
Yep.
But at least we have one important step for the sizing. Yeah.
Awesome. So just a quick recap and a summary of what we actually, ran through, right? So we understood use the Sizer, for example, the LiveOptics, tools to actually understand what the customer's landscape, the IT landscape looks like. Feed that information first into the Microsoft Sizer. So you go through the Microsoft Sizer to understand what are some of the each of the parameters that you need to really understand, and discuss that with customers as well in terms of resiliency and all of those conversations. Once you have an output from the Microsoft Sizer, feed that input into our Dell Sizer, and again sit with the customer to understand the networking aspects of it as well, because that's something that's not covered in the Microsoft Sizer. So you go through all of the Dell Sizer to understand the networking nitty-gritties of the solution and what needs to go in with that as well. And once you have the output from the Dell Sizer, that's when you can give that for our coding team and start the coding process, right? So do you think that pretty much covers everything end to end, Andri?
Yeah, I guess we cover everything for the sizing process. So
awesome.
It's yeah, just want to stress out that it's useful to have a data-driven sizing. So you need to have your workload, your requirements in hand before we even do any sizing exercises. Yeah.
Awesome. It's been such a learning experience personally for me as well, Andri. Thank you so much. Any final thoughts before we call it a day?
I guess we cover everything, Giant, for the sizing. Yeah. So
that's awesome.
Feel free. I mean, feel free to contact us and Dell account team, so we can sit together with the customer and to size.
Yep, absolutely. And this video is going to be shared on LinkedIn and YouTube, and also on Twitter as well. Feel free to reach out to us if you really need to. Either you can reach out to me directly or Andri, and we will further align you with the right account team as well if you're really interested to learn more about Azure Stack HCI. So again, just to kind of recap, if you really want, I know it's been a very, very long video. Please feel free to use different chapters if you want to skip ahead to different sections to understand how to go through each of these sections and what you need to do and so on. But I hope you really enjoyed this video. Andri, again, thank you so much for spending time to come over and talk to our listeners throughout this end-to-end sizing activity. Don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Giant on Cloud, and also don't forget to ring that bell that every time we sit through one of these podcast sessions. And again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you on the other side.